Hello, my darlings. So we need to talk today about the difference between DNA and RNA. Last class we learned about DNA and we learned it's called, ooh, my laser pointer is a little crazy there, deoxyribonucleic acid. It's got a 5-carbon sugar as part of its structure. That 5-carbon sugar is called deoxyribose. We know that the complementary base pairs are adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine. Remember A to T and C to G. We also know that DNA has a double helix structure, and you can see that here in this green section. This is a molecular picture, if you will, of DNA, and you can see that double helix structure with the rungs coming across. And we know that DNA contains the genetic instructions for making proteins and other structures in our body. Now, the flip side, and I guess not maybe the flip side, but there is also in our bodies something called RNA, and RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. So basically what you do is you take off the deoxy part and it's just called ribonucleic acid. It also has a 5-carbon sugar as part of its structure, but that 5-carbon sugar, instead of being deoxyribose, that 5-carbon sugar is called ribose. It does also have complementary base pairing, right? Adenosine, cytosine, guanine, and uracil. So there's a difference there. Whenever you're pairing up the bases in RNA, everywhere you think thymine should go, you have to replace it with uracil. So adenine bonds to uracil in RNA, and then the cytosine and the guanine are exactly the same like you would do for DNA. Instead of being a double helix structure, it's just a single strand of nucleotides, so one side, right? And you can see here's a picture of it up here, and it's just a single-stranded mess like spaghetti. And instead of containing our genetic information, it helps read the instructions, right? It helps read the instructions that are already in the DNA and then tells our cells how to make proteins and other structures. So remember, DNA holds the instructions, RNA reads the instructions and deciphers the instructions and tells the cells what to do with those instructions. Okay, so here are kind of the most important parts of RNA. Obviously, it's a nucleic acid. We already know that. It's used in protein production. It's single-stranded. Instead of containing genetic information, it transmits genetic information. We call it ribonucleic acid, not deoxyribonucleic acid. That would be DNA. It's also made of nucleotides, which are made of a 5-carbon sugar, a phosphate group, and a nitrogenous base. The difference between DNA and RNA, one of the differences, is that the sugar in RNA is ribose, not deoxyribose. And instead of thymine, like you would see in DNA, remember A to T, C to G, but in RNA, adenine bonds with uracil instead of thymine. So when I do my complementary base pairings with RNA, every time I see an adenine, for DNA I think thymine, but oh, it's RNA, so I have to replace the thymine with uracil. You can see here a picture of the single-stranded RNA. It's just like a half a DNA molecule. That's all it is. And then here's your double helix DNA over here. There are 3 types of RNA. There's what we call mRNA, tRNA, mRNA, tRNA, and rRNA. mRNA stands for messenger RNA. tRNA stands for transfer RNA. And I don't know if that came through on the video because I had to pause it because my puppy dog was barking. But tRNA stands for transfer RNA, and rRNA, which is hard to say sometimes, stands for ribosomal RNA. So first we'll talk about messenger RNA. This is the one you're going to write about on Wednesday in your CRQ. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Pay very close attention. Messenger RNA is single-stranded. It's made directly from DNA, so we're going to learn how that happens later on next week in a process called transcription. What you need to know right now, though, is that it's an exact copy of the genetic code of DNA. It's 300 to 9,000 nucleotides long. Remember, each little nucleotide And like I said, it's made through a process called transcription. mRNA is a single-stranded molecule made through transcription from DNA to create a copy of the DNA's genetic code. Hint, hint, wink, wink. This makes for a really nice quote in your CRQ coming up on Wednesday. So that's mRNA. The other type of RNA is called tRNA. It actually looks like a T, more like a cross, but I guess like a T, more like railroad tracks to me. If you follow, it's single-stranded. You can follow it right around the railroad tracks, and the railroad tracks, for whatever reason, are in the shape of a T. We're going to learn about that later. It's called transfer RNA. It's single-stranded. All RNA is single-stranded. And what it does is read the mRNA. So the mRNA is an exact copy of your DNA, and then the transfer RNA comes in and reads the mRNA, and then it tells the rRNA, right, ribosomal RNA, how to make proteins. So molecules of rRNA migrate from the nucleus to the cytoplasm, where they combine with proteins to make up a ribosome. Remember, ribosomes are all these tiny little dots, right? And you can see all the tiny little ribosomes on the endoplasmic reticulum here. And ribosomes are like the workbenches, right? That's where the workbench of the cell, that's where the proteins get made inside the cell. But I don't want you to get all caught up with how the RNA works and how it makes the proteins. Right now, I want you to know that there are three kinds. Let me go back. There are three kinds of RNA. There's messenger RNA, transfer RNA, and ribosomal RNA. Okay, so when I ask you on a test or quiz or in your CRQ, tell me about RNA, you can tell me there are three kinds of RNA. Messenger RNA, mRNA, right, is an exact copy of the genetic code. That's what I want you to take home from this slide. Transfer RNA reads mRNA. Just commit that to memory for now, and I'm going to show you how all that happens next week. But right now, it's enough for you to know that the T stands for transfer, and it's what reads the information in the mRNA. And then finally, ribosomal RNA combines with small proteins to make up a ribosome. Okay, without ribosomal RNA, we don't have ribosomes, and if we don't have ribosomes, we can't make proteins. So again, this is a really great comparison chart so that you can see the difference between DNA and RNA, and you can use this for your CRQ on Wednesday, so make sure you keep a copy of this screencast. But again, the biggest differences between DNA and RNA, DNA is that double-stranded double helix. RNA is single-stranded. Instead of using thymine, RNA has uracil as one of its complementary bases. It's nitrogenous base. And then, of course, RNA is not like the keeper of the code. RNA just helps read your genetic code. So I have something really fun here. I want to see if I can bring this up. It is our course, and it's lesson 1.03. So if I go to my class homepage and I click on today, which is January 11th, and I go to 103, it's going to look a little different on yours than it is on mine because I'm in the teacher version of the course. But if I go to the Explore section of 103, and then I click all the way through to page 9, there's a little fun kind of game, I guess you could play, a bunch of little questions. So it says single-stranded structure. Is that DNA, RNA, or both? And I would click on RNA. And then we check it, and yay, we got it right. And then we go to the next one, double helix structure, that would be DNA. Nucleotides have a sugar, a phosphate, and a nitrogenous base. I think that's both, right? They're both DNA, or they're both nucleic acids, that's what I meant to say. And so they have a sugar, a phosphate, and a nitrogenous base. I think that's both. Yay! So I'm not going to do the rest of these for you, but I think it would be fun if you went in and did them. This one is asking which one is just ribose for its sugar. This one is asking which one has deoxyribose for its sugar, but that's spelled wrong. I have to go fix that. Which one has the nitrogenous bases of adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine? And which one has the nitrogenous bases of adenine, cytosine, guanine, and uracil? So that's page 9 of lesson 103. And if you get it wrong, you check it. It tells you got it wrong, and you can try it again and again until you get it right. So make sure you try that too, because it's just kind of a fun, cute little thing to do.